How to write a constitution of yourself. People often come to counterweight when some kind of authoritarian policy or program with a critical social justice theme is imposed on them. Many intuitively feel that it is illiberal but struggle to find the right words to express their concerns. Now, if you grew up in a society that is largely liberal and shared these values, you might not have ever had to argue for liberalism. It was simply a given that people should be treated as individuals, that everyone should have the same rights and rules, and that different people can believe different things and say so. This has unfortunately changed. A new ideology has entered the scene. It doesn't see individuals, but only identity categories embedded in power structures. We are now told that it is not okay for different people to believe different things. Only some people should speak about certain things and others are told to shut up. Only some views are said to be authentic for people of a certain race. Others are not, and some things must not be said at all. And the rules about what we should or shouldn't say are changing extremely rapidly. At Counterweight, we don't expect everybody to have the same values or beliefs, but we do have a liberal humanist ethos. We believe in the equal worth of all humans regardless of their race, sex, sexuality, or any other element of their identity. In order to argue for the value of viewpoint diversity or defend your freedom of belief, you need to have a clear understanding of yourself and your own principles and be able to stand up for them consistently. A helpful exercise is to create what we call a constitution of yourself. Let's have a look at a few questions and arguments. As we go along, feel free to give the video a quick pause after hearing the question and suggested answers, just so you can have a quick think about what aligns best with your own values. When you think about them, you should be able to distill your values into something that you can express confidently. 1. Do I believe in freedom of belief and speech? If your answer is no, then we probably aren't for you. But if your answer is yes, you should be able to say why. For example, A. Every person owns their own mind and gets to decide what lives there. Freedom of conscience is the right of every person. B. It benefits society. By hearing and comparing many ideas, we can advance knowledge and moral progress. C. If people may not express bad ideas, we cannot point out why they are bad and cannot defeat them. D. I want to hear new ideas so I can test them against my own and find out whether I'm wrong. E. Disallowing people to have their own minds is bullying. It opens up the door to more authoritarianism. The most powerful will always be the ones to decide what can be said. 2. Do I think people should be treated primarily as individuals or as identity categories? How much of their race, sex, or sexuality matter to me? There are a range of liberal responses to this. A. I think people should be treated only as individuals. I will push thoughts of their race, sex, or sexuality out of my mind. This gets in the way of me connecting with another human being. B. I think people should be treated as individuals and as members of certain groups. Their group membership is part of them as an individual. That helps me to think about anything that could be insensitive before speaking. C. Someone's race, sex, or sexuality should only matter to me if it becomes directly relevant. People's identity labels don't tell me anything about them. If it matters to them, they'll tell me. 3. How much do I believe I have been socialised into specific beliefs and biases? And how much do I believe I have individual agency to evaluate and reject or accept certain ideas? With this one, there is a bit of a sliding scale between I'm not at all influenced by my culture and everybody is unavoidably socialised into holding white supremacist beliefs, neither of which are very plausible. Following are some examples that are more plausible. A. There are many ideas circulating in society and I think I have the ability to evaluate them and draw my own conclusions. B. I reject the idea that I and everybody else is unavoidably socialised into white supremacist, patriarchal, transphobic and other oppressive discourses. These are not dominant discourses and are actually widely regarded negatively. C. I believe that I may have picked up some unconscious bias that may have to do with race, gender or sexuality, etc. I differ on what these are and how best to address them from the critical social justice scholars and should have the right to do so. D. The workings of my inner mind are private. My employer has the right to expect certain behaviours of me, not access to my mind, conscience or otherwise. I should not be forced to discuss my beliefs and values with others. 4. What do I think is the best way to address racism and other bigotries? Again, we're assuming that you believe these things are bad. If you don't, then this won't be for you. A. I think we need to consistently oppose any prejudice or discrimination on the grounds of immutable characteristics. B. I think we need evidence of racism or other bigotry being the explanation for any disparities or incidents. We cannot just assume that it is because of theories about invisible systems of oppression. C. I think we need to take an empirical approach to claims of systemic injustice and measure it so that we can make workable plans to tackle it, and also measure the results of these actions so we can be sure to actually address problems rather than just talking about them in fashionable ways. D. I believe we need to treat people as individuals, as I am concerned that excessively focusing on race and other identity factors will reduce empathy and strengthen prejudice. 5. Why do I feel the need to object to whatever critical social justice policies or programs are being imposed on me? People often intuitively feel that a policy or program is illiberal and intrusive and imposes a worldview on them that is not theirs, but they struggle to say exactly why and fear being labelled racist or transphobic. It helps to hone down precisely what the problem is in your particular situation. A. I don't share this particular belief system and want to oppose racism, sexism and homophobia from my own ethical framework, which, fill in the blank with whatever framework it is and how you oppose prejudice from it. B. I find it too simplistic and reductionist to impose a single worldview and explanation on everyone when reality is much more complex. C. I think this approach is essentialist and tries to tell me what I think, believe and experience just because of the colour of my skin, sex, gender or sexuality. I think this is a kind of racial, etc. bias in itself. D. I object to the authoritarianism, even if I actually agree with some of the ideas. People are being tested and required to affirm certain beliefs, and I stand against this on principle. E. I am afraid that the expectation to hold certain views about race and gender and express them in the correct terms is making the workplace atmosphere fearful and uncomfortable and divides people. None of these questions or answers are exhaustive. There are many more that you can ask yourself. Some will come up when you encounter a policy or program that you see as illiberal. You might quite naturally think that this makes racist generalizations, or this makes everybody pretend to believe things about gender that many don't believe. But while many liberal people will also immediately see these as problems, critical social justice adherents will not. For example, one chapter in Robin DiAngelo's book, Nice Racism, is entitled Why It's Okay to Generalize About White People. Similarly, much of the theory around gender identity claims that not following their view is literally dangerous to trans people. Such general objections will likely be seen as evidence that you simply haven't been trained to see the error of your thinking yet. When writing your constitution of yourself, highlight the bits of any specific policy or program that stands out to you as illiberal. Then think your objections through back to first principles. If you are met with the claim that it is okay to make generalizations about white people, you'll be ready to counter this by arguing that racial essentialism, the idea that we could only ever be defined by our race, is never helpful, and most importantly, explain why you believe so. Similarly, if you are told it is ethical to force people who don't believe in gender identity to pretend to have one, you can argue that people must be allowed to hold their own philosophical beliefs or disbeliefs, and that they can do so while opposing any prejudice or discrimination against trans people. You don't need to read loads of philosophy to be able to argue for your own first principles, but give them thought and have them clear in your own head. This helps you to disagree in a thoughtful way, but also feel confident and stronger in your own principles. It also helps you assess whether any of your own intuitions are actually illiberal, and you may wish to rethink them.